to just go through, well, what we consider main concepts that we'll go through this hour and 45 minutes to go. Just a quick look to the questions. First one is related to whether the selected bin to be counted in the warehouse will be allowed to, let's see, receive objects within it. So that's the first one. Second, related to the roles involved in the counting and controlling exercise, we'll see how those roles are. A bit of that sequence of a high-level process of the counting and controlling exercise, what comes after and what's before. So it's basically 4 main processes. We'll go through the 4 of them. Question number 4 related to a recount. So it's not only counting, but you can recount or not. We'll see how it's done and which are the, let's say, the consequences in the system when you do recounting. Question number 5 related to basically where the differences that you find, if any, within the counting and controlling process, where those differences will have an impact in the inventory, in budget, in a warehouse, or none of the both. We'll see. Then in number 6, we'll see once we find some differences in terms of system quantity and whatever we find in the warehouse, whether the inventory is impacted and whether the situation will, how the inventory will be affected in whether it's reduced or increased. If it is if the quantity physically counted, it's more than the system quantity. So we'll try to answer to these 6 questions and of course some others related to the process. And without further ado, we'll go to the presentation. It's just a small one, so don't think that we'll go with a lot of theory, but the idea is to just reinforce some of the concepts that we'll go through this week or last week, and then once we have clarity in all these concepts from the theoretical perspective, then we'll jump into the system and see how things are done. Okay, so as you said, we went through the pooling questions first. We're going to go through a short presentation and then followed by a demo, and then we'll do again the pooling questions. Okay, so these first 2 slides are to really consolidate what we went through last week, on the most important concepts that will eventually have an impact in the counting and controlling process, which is things like batch management, cycle count, inventory freeze, material master. You all know already that the management of batches will be homogeneous on partial quantities for a particular material or product. So not all PIDs, not all materials are batch managed. Some of them, if they are batch managed, then that will be identified in the material master record in the PID. So basically, we are talking about vaccines, things that have an expiry date, okay, stuff like that. So we will have to take, when we go through the counting and controlling process in the system, when we do physically the count as a warehouse user, we'll have to take a look at whether those materials are batch managed or not. In terms of cycle count, this is a method that makes available the inventory to be counted at the regular intervals without a fiscal year. Okay, the intervals will depend on the cycle counting indicator set for the material. You have a cycle count, but you have a manual count as well. Okay, so it's not a matter of, okay, now the system tells me to count, but you can do a manual count whenever you think that it's important to do. It's counted on an ad hoc basis. Okay, and that will be identified by the management of the inventory and warehouse. So we'll go through what is a cycle count, and we may need feedback from you on that regard, because to the best of my knowledge, and I don't know whether I have full scope, but it's the cycle count is not being placed at least 100%. So I think that usually what we do, it's a manual count based on the strategy on the counting and controlling process in the missions and in the bases. So if you have more information on the cycle versus manual counting, you just can chip in. You can share your comments in the chat, or you can speak up, no problem whatsoever. Okay. Then we want to drag your attention with what we call inventory freeze. As you can see in the slides, this is an option that can be selected during counting. But basically, you're taking a snapshot of the inventory at a certain point in time, okay? But in a way, the inventory levels can still change, okay? It's an inventory freeze, but as well, you are freezing the warehouse, okay? When you're basically counting all the different bins in your warehouse, and for example, all your bins within the warehouse in BNDC, all those bins will be, let's say, deactivated to receive items within their bins, right? So as long as you're counting, those bins will be, let's say, blocked in a way, right? But that doesn't mean that the inventory will be freezed, okay? In terms of material master, we went through that part and we know already what it means last week. Okay, the manual count, it's what I mentioned before, that you can always decide as a warehouse senior user to start counting all your bins or a particular sample of them. In terms of plant, this is an inventory concept that is the location where the materials are produced, purchased, stored. Basically, this is, let's say, the mission from the inventory point of view. Let's put it like that, in a very simple way. But the plant will be the mission from the inventory point of view. You'll see that in the counting and controlling, we are playing with the warehouse concepts and the inventory concepts. Basically, we're taking action in the warehouse, but all the impacts of the counting and controlling process will have an impact in our inventory, in the quantity and the value of our inventory. And eventually, this will trigger some financial postings at the end of the day, okay? Then posting block, it's an option that can be selected during counting, where all the posting for a certain material or plant is blocked until the count results are entered and any differences are posted. Okay, so that makes sense, that's right, because if you are, let's say, counting and controlling, I don't know, 80% of the bins in your warehouse, during that part, no postings will be activated in those bins, in the differences, if any, in the bins that will trigger differences in inventory and eventually in finance, right? So the time that you are basically undertaking the exercise of counting and controlling, you are freezing that bin, and eventually the postings will take place, if any, once that counting and controlling process is finished. As we mentioned, the batch management, that it's important to take an account when we do counting and controlling. The serialization is as well important. Why? Because once we, for example, if we're going to count a bin with 150 computers, each of those computers will have a serialization number, an equipment master record, and we find any differences between reality and what the system tells us. If we find less number of computers, then we will have to take a look at which are the serial numbers of those missing computers, right? Because eventually that will have a consequence in the equipment master record, because we eventually will have to write off or deactivate those pieces of equipment, right? So the counting and controlling processes down the road will trigger some other finance processes.
Daniel,
yes.
I think you are not sharing your presentation, and we are recording without it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought I was.
Yeah, at some point it disappeared, and I thought you were just switching from screen to screen, but no.
Oh, okay. Thank you for telling me. I thought I was. Yes, your desktop. I don't know why. Okay. Thank you, Nico, for that. How is now?
It's there.
Is there? Okay, good. So you know what I'm going to do basically, because basically if I share the whole thing in presentation, somehow it goes off after 2-3 minutes. So if you don't mind, I will go like this without any animation, just in case, to be on the safe side. Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Nico. So then the serialization important as well as storage location, because it will reflect, each storage location will reflect the inventory owned by a particular fund center in the plant. So then what's counting and controlling? For the ones of you who are not familiar with this process, basically, this process will support a main UN process of conducting a physical count of our inventory to verify the quantity and condition of the materials in inventory. Okay, basically, we're going to take a look at the physical stock in our warehouse, and we're going to compare that physical stock on what we have in the system. Okay, so basically, we're going to take a snapshot of all our bins, and then we're going to count physically those bins and see what's there. And then we're going to cross-reference both data and see whether we find any discrepancy. If we do find a discrepancy, then we will have an affectation down the road in inventory and then in some financial processes. And then we will have to update it with my master records, if any. And sometimes, as we discussed last week, if we are identifying one piece of equipment which at the same time is an asset because it goes above the threshold, then we will have to create an asset master record, right? Remember that sometimes that happens, and basically in some missions like UNAMID, we may find thousands of those cases, right? So counting and controlling as well as physical verification, it's a way for us to compare reality versus what's in the system, what's in Umoja, right? Then how to count. Basically, we're going to select a number of bins in the warehouse, and that's going to be the job of the warehouse senior user. As we saw before, the counting in a warehouse managed storage location will freeze the selected bin, so no movements will be allowed in the bins subject to count. And we can see that because when we launched the report LX02, remember that Brian launched that report a lot of times on day 4 and 5. Basically, we have there a code IA, which is inventory active. This is an indicator that you will see an X if this bin is blocked because accounting is being performed in that moment. Okay, so that's why you'll see that those bins will be frozen, let's say, during that time. And then you will see in that report whether there is a counting and control exercise performed during that time, and then you will see what's that inventory record, because every time that we're performing a counting and controlling process, the system will give us a number, right, of that record, and we will see that number just aside of that bin, if that is the case. And then if that bin is not currently being counted, but was counted, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, we will see that date when the last warehouse count took place for that bin. So you'll see those three concepts in the report that we launched. So the warehouse senior user will have a very good perspective of all the bins, what's in each of the bins, available stock, whether that bin is being counted, whether that bin was counted, and the date that the last counting took place. Then the process itself can be broken down. We're talking here from, let's say, 40,000 feet. So it's very, we're zooming out. But basically, in a nutshell, what you have here, it's a preparation of the inventory counting and controlling by the warehouse senior user. So he or she is going to really identify the materials and bins to be counted. Then it's important to clear all interim storage types. Okay, and what we mean with this, it's when we have, let's say, a goods issue on a goods receipt that it's triggering a transfer requirement. You see that in that transfer requirement, we have, let's say, what we called a virtual storage type, where the system basically, the inventory is taking or doing the movement that eventually will create a transfer order. So all those storage types, starting with 9, will have to be cleared to make sure that the whole perspective of the bins are, let's say, available for us to do the counting and controlling. And at the same time, he or she, the warehouse senior user, will have to have a good clarity of the TRs pending to be created and close all of them, and confirms open TOs as well. So you see that from the inventory point of view affecting warehouse, and from the warehouse point of view with the TOs, everything has to be really cleared before we do the counting and controlling process, especially if those the different bins that will be affected have open TOs, or TRs will eventually have an impact on them. So, and this was especially important during the PIDO process, in order to optimize and clear all the numbers from the inventory point of view, because as you can see in the next slide, let me see here. What we say here: before counting and controlling, clean up your warehouse transactions. So all the TOs pending to be confirmed have to be cleared. All the transfer requests pending TO creation have to be cleared. Why? Because this situation makes difficult the correct execution of the counting and controlling process. So this is really, really important, because if you are counting and you already have a list of records within a particular number of bins, but eventually the day that you finish that counting, then you have 15 different TOs confirmed that will affect those bins, I think it will be important to recount again and make sure that all those transfer requests and transfer orders are duly, let's say, created in the system, and the reflection of those actions in the system it's matching the reality, right? So important to clear up all the pending transactions, right? So I think that a lot of what you will have to do from the warehouse point of view, we'll have to deal with this, with TOs and TRs pending, that you have to clear before you do the counting and controlling process. Okay, this is very, very important. And let me go back to the other slide. Okay, so first, as we said, identify the materials and bins, clear all the interim storage types. And let me see if I have this presentation here. Here we go. This is the, let's say, the course on the warehouse from Umoja. Okay, and let me look for interim. So this is staging area, right? What we mean with this virtual staging area is when we perform a goods receipt or a goods issue, there is an interim storage of unloaded goods until they are put away, right? So this, let's say, like some sort of limbo, right, from the system point of view, where when we perform a goods receipt or a goods issue with the different movement types, there is a staging area. So these are the areas where that will have to be cleared by the warehouse senior user before we do the inventory counting and controlling. On top of that, we'll have to take a look at the pending TRs and confirming the open TOs as well. Okay, so that's, let's say, the preparation of the counting and controlling process. Then when we're finished with the preparation, then we'll have to execute the process, which starts with the physical inventory document, which is a document that will, let's say, you can print, and it will give you a list of the different items within a particular bin. So you can, let's say, go with your checklist, and go one by one. If we're talking about serial items to be serialized, checking the serial numbers, checking the number of spare parts, checking the number of vaccines, and making sure that what's in inventory from in reality in the warehouse matches what Umoja is saying, right? So that's your physical inventory document. We'll see how that's done in the system. Then, obviously, after we create the physical inventory document, we will conduct the real physical count, and that's the responsibility of the warehouse user. Then this person as well will enter the results of those counting in the system of the counting, and then the property control user will post the differences, if any, from the inventory point of view and the warehouse point of view as well. So as you can see, in a nutshell, we are going to talk about three main roles: warehouse senior user, warehouse user, and the property control user, where he or she will eventually post the differences in the inventory if there are differences between reality and the system as well. Okay, so just to see where we're coming from the concepts, right, and a high-level perspective of what to count and what implications are when we are doing the counting, because some of the bins will be frozen, let's say. Then we have a preparation stage where the warehouse senior user makes sure that everything is cleaned up before we perform the counting and controlling process. And after that, there is let's say, not a workflow, but a sequence of steps that will have to take place in order to do the whole process from A to Z. Okay, so before I move on, I think Elena is taking a look at the chat. Morning, Elena. Do we have any question or any comment worth mentioning? Over to you.
No, Danny, everything is on track.
Okay, thank you, Elena. So then once we execute, so we know now how the process is done, very high level. We know already the roles involved, and then we're going to execute the process, the counting and controlling process. First, as you saw in the previous slide, and you see now, there is a creation of the physical inventory document, and it's the responsibility of the warehouse senior user. And this person as well will have to close the pending inventory and warehouse transactions, these transactions that we were mentioning before, right? And even the ones in the staging area, right? So this, let's say, step number one in green, it's very, very important in order to have a clean process afterwards. Then there is a physical count of the items in the warehouse, and then the person responsible will enter those results. So it's, let's say, point number two, where we will have to see whether a recount is applicable or not. And that depends on the situation, right? If there is a huge difference, or the warehouse senior user thinks that it's important to do a recount of a particular number of bins because the differences found are quite high, or it's not matching the last counting that was performed in that particular bin, it's perfectly normal that a recount can be applicable. So, and I guess that this is a situation that may occur in reality, and it's probably happening in Brindisi a lot of times. So a recount is applicable, of course, depending on the situation, right? And I cannot tell you exactly when a recount is applicable, depending on the situation on the bin, depending on the situation on the, especially during the life cycle in the counting and controlling process, in the mission. So a recount, it's applicable even if no differences were posted. So in order to make sure that for a particular strategic number of material IDs, we have a good clarity of what's going on in the warehouse. So a recount is possible. And then when a recount is done, or if it is not done, but we find differences between the system and reality, then the property control user will have to clear those differences. And those adjustments will be done in the warehouse before clearing the differences in inventory management. Okay, so you'll see in the demo that we'll have to perform a clearing of differences in the warehouse and then in the inventory. So the affectation in the different accounts in finance will be properly tracked, right? So this is an important step, because eventually we are basically telling the outside world how much our inventory has its value, right? So the value of the inventory will have a dependency on the final outcome of the counting and controlling process as well. So this is a very important process, especially for big missions with plenty of storage locations and warehouse with a lot of bins and different storage types, different buildings of type of physical locations where we are storing different items. So it's a very important process. Then this is a bit of the same, let's say, sequence of process. Remember that you had a question in the polling part. How first you have to conduct a physical count, then you enter those numbers into the system. You post the difference. The property control user will post those differences, and then there will be a financial posting resulting in the creation of the Umoja material and accounting documents. Okay, but that's the job of the property control user. And from the warehouse perspective, once you enter the different results of the counting and controlling process in your warehouse, let's say you're done, right? So those differences will be posted by another role. Then if we're talking about the differences on inventory, okay, important to see which those differences are. So as you can see in the screen now, inventory differences detected with the count are investigated to determine the root cause of the discrepancy. So it's not not only the number that it's not matching reality, right? So the number of items you find in a bin versus what Umoja says, but you really have to investigate why this is happening and what's the root cause. So if you find it, that will not happen again, right? So a full clarity. So the objective here is having a full clarity of the situation, so we can make decisions in order to not having any more differences in the future, right? So that's important. And then if we're just going to stick to the numbers, if the quantity physically counted is less than the system quantity, then the inventory is going to be reduced, right? So if we are foreseeing that we're going to find 150 computers in a particular bin, and for some reason they are not there, and we cannot find it in another bin, then we'll have to take actions in the system, and eventually inventory will be reduced by the value of those 150 items. So it's important because, as I said before, this will affect all the books in terms of inventory and then eventually postings in finance. On the contrary, and it may happen as well, if the quantity physically counted is more than what the system says, then the inventory will be increased. And this is the situation where, for whatever reason, we're finding a server that was not meant to be in a warehouse, but is not even in the records in inventory. Then we will have to add to a stock, as we saw the other day with Brian, that particular piece of equipment. And moreover, if that equipment it's an asset as well, because the threshold, the value of that piece of equipment, it's above a particular threshold from the IPSAS point of view, then we will have to inform the financial accountant to create an asset master record, and that will have to be added into a stock. So there are consequences down the road of the results of the counting and controlling processes. As you can see, the consequences are that the inventory may be reduced or our inventory may be increased. I guess that in most situations, it's the first situation when the inventory is reduced because for some reason there is a missing type of equipment. In some other reasons, I believe that should be the less number of cases, the inventory may be increased and after performing accounting and controlling process. I don't know when you guys are going to be deployed and you do this process, or you see the consequences of this process of the mission in UNAMID or MONUSCO or elsewhere. But I guess that in Brindisi, it's we're not talking about huge differences, right? Because the, let's say, stewardship and the accountability once the item reaches the base, either from the virtual point of view, the goods receipt, or from the physical point of view, there is a good tracking of that equipment, and it's properly tracked down in the system as well as in reality, right? But these things may happen, of course, in the mission and in Brindisi as well, everywhere. So next on inventory differences, you see, as we saw before, it's important to undertake an investigation, especially if the difference related to a serialized material, right? Because then we will have to take a look at the equipment master record. First, if it is missing, we'll have to write off and deactivate that item. And secondly, if we find something that was not initially in our inventory, we'll have to add to stock and create an asset master, an equipment master record. Okay, so then as well as you can see in the last two boxes, then those differences will let's say have an impact on the system status and user status of that equipment master record, right? So for example, here in cases where the counted quantity is less than the system quantity, when we enter the count of the inventory user, will specify the serial numbers which are not found. When the differences are cleared, the status of the corresponding equipment master records is automatically updated from ESTO, equipment idle, to available equipment idle. Further steps may be required involving asset accountant, if that is an asset, okay? So there is an impact in the equipment master record as well, because we'll have to take a look at what's going on in that part of the system as well, when we are finding less quantity that it's in reality in our bins. Then in some cases, the difference between system quantity and physical count quantity is related to transactions that have not been recorded, or they were wrongly recorded, and probably that happened a lot during the period process. Those inventory differences may result into extra quantity found, for example, goods received that have not been recorded in the system, or less quantity found, good issues haven't been recorded in the system. That's why we want to drag your attention to this part, right? Before counting and controlling, clean up your warehouse transactions in terms of TRs, TOs, as well as this clear material in the interim storage types, especially for goods receipts. Let me take a look at this. This interim storage uploaded, these goods receipts and goods issues that has an interim storage type before we take action in the warehouse. Okay. So that's basically what I wanted to say in terms of like concepts from counting and controlling. As you can see, in a nutshell, we're talking about going to the warehouse, taking a look at the different bins, see what's there, compare the reality with the system. Then we have a series of roles involved, like the warehouse senior user doing all the preparation, the warehouse user doing the hard work, going through different bins in the warehouse, entering those results of counting into the system, and then the property control user will take a look at those differences and will post the differences, and the affectation in the books and in the financial postings will happen afterwards. Things to take into account: the TOs and TR spending. It's important to do a good housekeeping of that, because that will have an affectation as well in the counting and controlling process, and eventually to have clarity on the differences on inventory, how these happen, and the impact in the equipment master record as well. So kind of like an overall summary of the main points that we went through these first 40 minutes. So any questions so far? Any comments, Elena, in the chat, or anyone? Thank you.
Nothing pending. Just to draw your attention that the thresholds have been replied by Nico in the Teams chat, not in this meeting chat.
Daniel.
Yes, Nico. Thank you, Elena.
Sorry. Okay, just a small clarification. After the warehouse senior user post and enter the count result, from the property control user, in order to post the difference according with the warehouse model, they need a reason code. Okay, why this material is lost. So there is a 5 reason code. I share this on the chat. I share it now, but it's not possible to add this info straight into the inventory document. Okay, so how we managed here by email. After the recount is done, we specified to the property control user the reason why we are posting a difference of items at bin level. Okay, and those are the reason code to be shared after the counting with the property control. Okay.
Hi, Nico. And now that you are online, thank you for that comment. Because obviously, I mean, we know these things from the system point of view and from let's say, the different presentations and the different analysis that we have gone through the years. But honestly, I haven't done myself, never, these counting and controlling processes. Can you share just a little bit, 2-3 minutes of what's the reality is in terms of counting and controlling? Do you guys in Brindisi or in any other mission count all bins, or do you do a sample, or there is a strategy in place based on the materialities?
Nothing less, nothing more than the one you share. This is exactly the process as you presented. There are just some problems faced during the count because first of all, this one is object of New York KPIs, and every 3 months from 1st of July till end of June, this is monitored from Kirill and his team, and it's one point of his KPIs, okay? With the exception of the April, May, and June, that in parallel to this counting and controlling process, there is the high stock value counting and controlling process, okay? For the control of all the items in inventory and warehouse with a value of above $5,000. So, but the process is exactly the one that you share in your presentation. And here in Brindisi, we face not so many problems on that. When we found some small discrepancy, we forward the info to the property control user, and he used to clear the inventory and warehouse, both of them. So the problem is that under this control of monitoring from New York, this is done at bin level, of course, and at PID level. Okay, but this control, even if we know that, as you say before, that some transaction must be excluded, like the receiving or the good issue, because from a system point of view, they are read as a bin and a storage type itself. Those PIDs are under the counting control. So we know that we have to exclude it, but and since those items are not physically received, I mean they're received in terms of a movement from a bin, from this staging storage area to a proper bin, or when the good issue is finalized, those items are considered like to be counted. Okay, so this is one of the problem that is not a problem, because in this range of time probably these transactions are finalized, so no need to perform anything anymore. But it could happen that those items are stocked into the bin that actually is identified like the outbound number, or the PO number if it's receiving, and those needs to be counted. Okay, so it's extremely important to, as you said before, that all the action are finalized before to perform, but this never happened because it's a live system, you know. In the meanwhile, you are counting something is incoming or something else is going out from inventory and warehouse. So that's why it's done into an year time. and a fiscal year time, June, beginning of July, end of June. And nothing else, just the when you need to post the difference, you need to specify to the property control user the reason code. There is a variance, and you cannot do it straight away because there are no editable fields in the system, and you need to specify by email what the reason code is. I share the list of the reason code in the chat. Okay.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much, Nico, for that. You know, having a, let's say, a sip of reality, it's always really important, especially for, excuse me, for you guys who are going to be eventually deployed in the mission, and you will face the raw reality, right, at the end of the day. So I'm putting here this reason code that Nico was mentioning here, around here, right? Before these posting differences, we will have to identify the reason code of why we have discrepancies.
Danielle, it's Joe here. Can I ask a question,
Hi.
please?
Yes, Joe, of course.
And for Nico, who makes the changes in the system? Up or down in the inventory?
The property control user. It's a role map into Umoja. Just to understand, in Brindisi, it's Paul, for example.
Okay, so and let me ask you this question, because I'm aware of what happened in Minijuice, for example. When it comes to expendables, where the count is out with a value of more than $250, they have to get authorization from the delegated authority if they want to remove more than $250?
Well, in a case like that, it's suggested to be covered through a security report. Okay, because $250, we are talking about really small items, small quantities, generally speaking, into a big warehouse, and those are straight away cleaned by the property control user when the count result is posted into Umoja. Above that, and this has been asked several times and clarified by Kirill, there are some steps that need to be followed. Okay, and don't get into consideration Brindisi, because we really have a small discrepancy. But we know for sure that into liquidation point of view, most probably the missing quantity at bin level will be definitely more than $250 for sure.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I just have a last question on this. If the property management people, for some reason, adjust the records for that's over that threshold of $250, who monitors that and who can catch it?
Okay, the control of the warehouse in terms of PID and bins are usually managed by the warehouse people. In this case, the colleagues mapped with the warehouse senior user and warehouse user roadmap, and because they are the one that technically perform the counting. Okay. When the property control user jump into it, when there is a discrepancy, at the bin level that is notified by the warehouse, after that is the property control user that take the proper action and needs to clear this discrepancy for a simple reason, because until he didn't clear the bin, the beer is locked and you cannot do any kind of movements in terms of warehouse in that particular bins. You can manage at inventory level. I mean, you can receive or good issued from that bin, but you cannot perform any other action in terms of warehouse until the bin is not clear by the property control user. So they work together. definitely they work together. It's controlled and managed by the warehouse senior user, and managed in terms of cleaning by the property control user. It's,
Okay, just to
yeah,
clarify something, or to let people know that you're right, during liquidation, things are slightly different, but I can tell you for sure, and some of our people who've been in managers can comment on this if they like. We know that changes have been made in consumables well above that threshold without any documents being attached to approve that process. So I'm sure it goes on it went on in managers. I'm sure it'll go on in bigger missions as well, especially during liquidation. Thanks.
Thank you.
yes, you're right, John.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing and the questions, and Nico a lot to give us a little bit of grasp of reality, because at the end of the day, besides the system and besides all these slides, you guys will have to see reality. And just remember back in 2000, I don't remember, in UNAMID 2016 or 17, Brian and myself, we were there. And just talking with people over there, just vehicles were just disappearing from one day to another, right? And we're talking about 4x4. We're not talking about, a batch of vaccines or, some spare parts, an alternator or a small computer. So things disappear in the mission, and actions will have to be taken in order to reflect that reality in the system from the inventory point of view and the warehouse point of view as well. So thank you very much for those comments. Now it's, sorry, my voice is killing me. It's 10:57, so it's almost 1 hour. So why don't we go for a break of 5 minutes, and then we will jump into the system. We do the demo in 40 minutes, and then we do the polling questions. And if everything is good, we can go for lunch and then do the support session for the rest of the exercise. How does it sound, Elena, Brian?
Sounds good from here.
Okay.
Thanks,
Good.
Helena.
So let me just put the clock. So because otherwise I will stay for 15 minutes instead of 5. So in 5 minutes we'll see again each other. Bye. All right, so thumbs up. And hopefully you see my screen. Can you please confirm? Because after what
Yes,
happened
we do,
before,
Daniel.
thank
Yes.
you, Brian.
It was a quick
So,
minute, but yeah, we're
okay,
keeping
good.
an eye on it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So let me log into the system. While I log, I'm going to share with you as well this cheat sheet that we found, and it's quite interesting on the warehouse. Let me see if I have it here. I don't know if you see this. It's a warehouse management cheat sheet with, first of all, useful T codes from the warehouse point of view, and some tips and tricks that you can apply when putting away goods, or in terms of bin management or internal movement on goods. Internal movement on goods, basically, or internal PO. So basically, you're moving one item from one bin to another. Okay, so this is just in 4 pages. It's gives you a good perspective of the T codes, who does what, and the main actions to be done or performed in the system while you're doing warehouse business. So we will share with you this one, right? And let me just go to the system and see. I'm going to log in. So I think it's 510. That's the environment that we selected for this exercise. And then I'm going to take a look at the cover page, because as Brian was doing these days, right? We're going to jump from the cover or the body of the exercise to the system. So basically, as you will do once you start practicing with these exercises, you're going to use your cover page, follow the body, and go into the system. So we pretty much want to do the same thing. So you will receive a cover page with the different user IDs, password, and details of the master data elements that you need. Basically, we're going here to analyze the transactions and roles involved in the counting and controlling process now in the system. You're going to be given a bin to count. Obviously, in reality, the warehouse senior user will specify not only one, but several bins, or all bins to be counted, right? And then the different warehouse users will divide the work and do as I said, the hard work, going to different storage types, different buildings, different places, and take a look at the different bins, right? But for the sake of, because we are 40 plus students, we gave one bin to each one of you with 2 product IDs, an alternator, which is a spare part, and piece of equipment, which is a computer. Okay, you have the product IDs over here, and you have the guide for warehouse management, the job aid for counting and controlling, and the different T codes in place with the different roles involved. Good thing from the training environment in this case is that the user ID is going to be the same regardless whether we are warehouse senior user, warehouse user, or property control user. Okay, so we will not have to be logging in and logging off and logging on every single time that we're changing users, as we did on Friday. So we can just go in one single, let's say, shot throughout the whole exercise. Okay, but I will emphasize who does what, so we have clarity of who is doing each of the transactions while we're performing the demo. Okay, so basically, we're going to count bin. In this case, for myself, it's going to be ML quit 50. You guys will receive, as I said, different bins with the same product IDs, with one alternator and the computers as well. And then, sorry, I will go to the body of exercise. We logged in. And then, first of all, we are going to create our warehouse document. Remember that the warehouse senior user has to create a document that kind of like serves as the strategy that each of the users will have to put in place in order to count and go through the different items in the bin, right? But before that, because that's created with LI01N, that's a T code, the senior user, the warehouse senior user has to have a good perspective of how things are in his or her warehouse, right? So let's do LX02. Remember that this is the T code that will give us access to all of our materials in the different bins. So I think it's AF01. Let me double check in the cover page. You'll see that the warehouse is AF01, storage type is 001, and then the bin, each one of you will receive a different one, remember, okay? So storage type is 001. Then as a storage bin, you will have to put the ones that you have been assigned, but this is not a mandatory field. Let me execute the whole report with all the different bins. You see the storage bin is over here, and the available stock in each of the bins. So the warehouse senior user will have to take a look at all the different bins within his or her warehouse, in this case AF1 number 1, and we'll see the different type of materials and the list of bins with the available stock there in place, okay? Actually, in fact, I think it's better if we put this the layout. If we identify the UNWM stock layout, you'll see when I execute, I will have more columns. Instead of only 5 or 6, I will have here more columns. And this is quite interesting because I have here the goods received date for each of the materials. But most importantly, what I will have here, it's, remember the IA code that I was mentioning before? If I click on this column and let me identify, okay, descending order. These ones, these bins with this X code are the ones that are now, let's say, blocked or frozen to be counted. Because if you see this X, that means that these different bins, let me see where the bins are here. These different bins are now experiencing, let's say, some counting and controlling processes, and they are blocked now for any type of movement. You see that inventory record, this is the number of, let's say, the counting and controlling document created for that particular exercise. And on top of that, we have the last time that these bins were counted, we have here the date as well, okay? Then the TO quant, this is an internal number that we don't care about, that this is just given for any of these exercises. And then we have a total stock for each of the different bins by material, right? So for example, if I just take a look at my bin, okay, let me go back and just identify my own particular bin from my exercise. I think it's ML quit 50. And I execute. Here, what I have here, and let's say that I'm the warehouse senior user, and I want to take a look at this bin because they will be subject to be counted and controlled. So I see they have 2 materials, one alternator and computer. Actually, I have 50 alternators and 1 computer. Both of them are new items, so they've never been, let's say, issued out of my inventory. This is the goods received date, and I even have the material document created after the Migo transaction was performed. I can see that both of them, excuse me, the storage bin, it's let's say subject to be counted because I don't see any X, so it's free, let's say. It's never been counted, so you don't see any inventory record, and it's never been counted because you don't see any date over here, okay? So it's, let's say, cleaned before we start even creating the document that I was mentioning before, right? This warehouse count document. So, sorry, my voice, it's not the best, in the best of shape today. So LX02, we performed, we saw all the bins. Now we focused on our particular bin, and then we're going to create this warehouse count document, right? And we'll see how it goes. So I copy this T code, and let me create another session because I want to have that session opened. Because you will go during this exercise back and forward to check how the different actions that we are taking in the system is affecting your bin, right? So it's always wise to have it handy. So in order to create an inventory record, well, the system automatically it's pulling the last warehouse number used, in this case AF01. Storage type is 001. Let me double check with my exercise. You see, 1 and 001, and then storage bin, the bin indicated in your cover page. So I'm going to this is the plant count date and the inventory reference and inventory method. So I'm going to click OK. And now the system, let's say, creates a blank document. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, this is the LX02 exercise that we did before. Okay. I'm now performing LI01N in order to create the counting document. And now here in storage bin, I'm going to include the bin indicated in my cover page and the name of the counter who is going to perform the counter or the count in this particular bin. So let me go back into the system, and then I'm going to put here the one assigned to me. You, as I said before, you will receive another storage bin number. So this is the one assigned to me. And then I'm going to put here my name because I'm going to be the one counting this one. Okay, so basically you are identifying one bin. You can actually include not only one bin, but several of them, right? And I guess that the reality tells us that each warehouse user, let's say, will be responsible not only for one bin, but for several, right? Because we have plenty of them in the mission. So after we have done that, we're good to go. We can save our document. And this is important. This is the record that I was mentioning before. So you guys will have to take notes of this inventory record, which is 106. That's the record number of the counting and controlling document created for this particular bin. Okay. And if I go to LX02, let me see if I can go here. This is the inventory record assigned to my bin, right? Whenever I launch again this LX02, I will see this inventory record created for this particular bin. So what else? So then once the document is being created, then we will take a look at LX02 and see whether that document is being created. But first, we have to activate, as Nico mentioned before, the counting and controlling exercise has to be activated for this particular bin. Okay, so you have to go to LI02N in the system. Again, I'm going to go to the other one. So I'm going to put this decode in order to activate the counting in my bin. Excuse me. /n. Okay, you see that the inventory record just created 106 is retrieved automatically. And the inventory, the inventory statistic text tells me that it's been not counted still, that this is my bin, and the name of the counter is there. So in order to activate the counting in this particular bin, and remember, I'm now the warehouse senior user, let's say I'm starting the whole process, I have to click here on this, let's say, icon to activate. So now inventory number 106 is being activated. So if I go to LX02, again, with my bin number, and I click on execute, you see here two things. First, that the IA inventory X, it's already there. So this storage bin now, ML quit 50, it's frozen and no movements are allowed in this particular storage bin, right? Because I created, as a warehouse senior user, a document that that the record is 106, and then when I finish the counting and controlling part exercise of this particular bin, then you will see that the IAX will be removed. Okay, so always wise to have this LX02 T code And you every time that you are doing or performing one action in the system, you'll see how it's impacted, right? So let's go to the exercise. As you can see, we created the counting document. We activated the counting document. We reviewed the LX02 report. We see that the code is over there, X in both items for both materials, right? And we have an inventory record. Now we're going to print that document. And it's quite important, and you'll see why. Print, or basically, or you can have it in your tablet, right? I'm sure that you guys are using tablets in Brindisi, but you have some sort of a document that will guide you through the process while you're doing the counting and controlling process. So it's LI04 to print my inventory document. So here, basically, I will have to put my warehouse number, which is the inventory record. Remember, 106 for myself. And I will have to click on print list and print immediately to print it out. So inventory record is 106. I'm not recounting, so I leave it blank here. Print list, print immediately. Clicking OK. And now it's in XPS, so I will probably have to change this, and will gonna put this document within my own drive. All right, in documents, and no WebEx, counting and controlling, and I'm going to use physical count of 050, my name. I save it, and then I'm going to retrieve that record, which is over here. But I will have, because I'm using Mac, I will have to transform that into PDF. Let me do it quickly. It's 50, I think it's the one over here, 50. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to put in PDF. I'm going to place it in the same place, okay? And you see it's ready, created in PDF. Here we go. And this is the inventory list for annual inventory, my document created. So let's go and read it. You can see that, well, you know, it's a document that probably may belong to the 90s rather than 2020, but still, it's giving us, you know, useful information. So first of all, we have here our 106 number. So that's the number of the printing document for warehouse inventory counting and controlling, the date. This is the storage type, the building where my bin is placed. And then the system takes or grabs the document grabs from the system two initial lines. First, the PID for the alternator, and second, the PID for the computer. And then here I have a blank space where I can identify and put here a number, right? I can put there a number and see, count the number of spares that I did count physically when I went to the bin, and the same applicable for the computer. So that's page number one. Page number two, well, here I have a list of what I can see here, a material ID with the plant, storage location, it's okay, and then serial number. This is the serial number that it's the equipment master record assigned to each of the computers that the system finds for this particular PID, okay? A lot of them. Then the system is telling me, if I go back to ECC, and one of the reports that I have in this bin only one computer. But remember, from the inventory point of view, you never know exactly which is the serial number. So you cannot see here the serial number, but you know that you will have to find one computer, and then when you go directly into the bin, you'll see that computer which is the serial number assigned to it. So let's say, for example, that I go there and I find one computer, and this is the serial number, 101.27.922. Okay, so I can check that, and I can see, okay, yes, so it's this one, right? It's verified, and it's exactly that one with that serial number. So this is kind of like the document that the warehouse user will have in his or her own tablet, or you can print it out, and you go through the different items and check things. Okay. So first, the first page, it's a overview of what you can find. The system tells that from the product ID perspective, it's in the bin, and then if you have serial numbers assigned, excuse me, this PID, it's serialized as a serial computer and starts with 15, then the system will tell you which are the serial numbers assigned, excuse me, available, let's say in the different bins, and you will have to check physically which one it's the serial number assigned. Okay, so this is as per the print document. So as you can see, you have here further instructions or how each of the columns mean and what or for which purpose you have to use the different pages. But obviously, you don't have any information related to an alternator, because an alternator is not serialized, so you will never have information here for the serial number of an alternator. But yes, you'll have information on serial numbers for a computer, and you will have to check which one is the serial number that you find in that particular bin. So hope it's clear so far. So now let's say it's the time for the warehouse user, now that it's been printed, our document, to really do the counting. And as you could see in the presentation before, this physical count, it's done outside the Umoja system, right? So it's you go to different bins, and then you go with your document and do the physical count of your bin. First, we created the inventory document, warehouse senior user. Now the user is going to conduct the physical count. It may take 1 day, 1 week, depending on the assignment and the number of bins and the complexity of the exercise. But eventually, he or she will have to enter the count results. Okay. So again, you have to go into the system and enter those results. So for doing that, you have to use the following T code. And let me just put it a bit bigger, so I think it's better. It's LI11N. So let me go back to the system. I keep my report opened, so I'm not going to use that one. And I'm going to /n. And then I'm going to enter my inventory count. Do you know the system understands that you still are in the warehouse number AF1? The inventory record is 107, and the count date is today's date. Okay, and the name of the counter, it's Daniel Criado. Okay, so let me go back, and you can see that all those different, let's say, screenshots are over there. And just, I want to just drag your attention. If you go, this is for this exercise and for the rest of the exercises, and we discussed this with Brian, I think last week of today. Do not be, when you go through the exercises, do not be like so attached, let's say, to the screenshots and with the content of the screenshots, because sometimes these are screenshots with, let's say, with some other dates that they are not updated. So do not think that you have to put the same information that you can see in the screenshot. It's just for guiding purposes. So if you see here a red box, that means that you have to take action in this particular part of the screen, but that doesn't mean that you have to have the same amount of information and the same specifics as you can see. For example, it's not the same storage screen over here than in reality. It's just for guiding purposes, right? So, and I think that we might have not emphasized that enough, because sometimes you receive messages that it's not the same or there is some mistake. It's just for guiding purposes, right? The screenshots over here. So I put the date, as you can see, the name of the counter. And this is the scenario important, okay? Let's imagine that during the physical count, you didn't find any computer, remember that the computer it was one to be found in my bin. So, but we didn't find any. But I found 5 alternators than less than expected. Instead of 50, I found, let's say, 45. Okay, so you have 50, you found 45. So this is the scenario that it can happen as it happens in reality. So in order to indicate that you didn't find any computer, select 0 checkbox for the material. So again, let me go back to the system. And remember, I put my inventory record 106 is today's date. I counted this bin. And this is the screen that I see, and I go each of the line items are referring to the different materials, in this case, the spare parts. So here I'm going to put, instead of 50, I counted 45 as the exercise is telling me to that happened. Is 45 instead of 50. I'm not putting here 5. I'm putting here 45, which is the quantity that I counted in reality when I went through the bin. Okay. On the contrary, for the computer, I didn't find any, so I cannot put here any number. But you here have a let's say checkbox, which is for 0 quantity. So if we don't find any stock whatsoever, you just check there the match code. Okay. So as you can see, 45, this 0, and then I click on enter. All right, so you see the message underneath. The difference compared to book quantity is 10% for this particular item, for this material, which is the alternator. Okay, so is 5 less units out of 50, it's 10% less. Okay, so it's 10% in terms of quantity. And this is what you see. When you hit again on enter, you see you go directly to the following material. Okay, that's something that, for example, I was a bit shocked because I thought that nothing changed when I click on enter, and I was referring to the same material. But no, every time that you're hitting on enter, you will move in from one product ID to another. So I click once, so I move from the alternator to the computer. Okay, with 0 stock. So I click again on enter. So the system reflects all those changes, and now I can save. Click on save button to save your count results. Okay, so these are my results, and I click on save. So the inventory count added, it's already reflected over there. So I did my count, I reflected the data into my warehouse document for counting and controlling, which is 106. And let's see which is the next step. The recount business. Let's say that I go back and I say, Brian is the senior warehouse senior user, and I said, Brian, I found less alternators that I was supposed, and it's not only that, is that the only computer that was supposed to be there is not there, it's gone. And he says, if that's unacceptable, you have to do a recount, because last time that I checked, which was last week, then computer was there. So you didn't do a good job, or someone stole that computer. So in any case, let's initiate a recount. And the person initiating that recount, it will be the warehouse senior user. So you will have to go to LI 14. So we go to the system. Remember, we are going to recount again. LI 14 to start a recount. And the warehouse number is the same. The inventory record doesn't change. It's 106. Go back to the exercise. So you can see inventory record. In case that it's blank, you put the inventory record created initially, 106 in my case. And then I hit on enter. Okay, and in order to initiate the recount, you have to check or have verified that this line is already checked. You have here the first, the storage bin, which is 50 ml quit 050 with 2 material IDs. So information here on the differences here. First, I have 10% less, which in terms of quantity is 10%, but in terms of value difference from the inventory point of view is 500, a little bit over $500. So it's quite a large amount of money. But then for the computer that I didn't find, so you see the difference is 100% because there was one and I found none. So that computer is worth almost $4,000. And you see that the remarks automatically, the system says, you didn't find it, the material is lost. So it's okay. So that's the recounting, let's say, initial screen. Then you have to make sure that that checkbox related to that particular bin is checked, because you can initiate a recount not only for this one, but for several, right? So that's why you have to make sure that you check the bins that you want to recount. And then once checked, you click on initiate recount. Okay, so the recount 01 for this particular bin has been initiated. Okay, so now again, we have to print a count document, in this case for recount. So we go again to the same T code, LI04. I hope you guys are following. I haven't checked with Elena, but if you don't interrupt me, or if there is nothing worth mentioning, I will move on. But just for the sake of checking, is everything okay from the chat point of view? Over to you.
Yes, Danny, and the chat is quiet. So
Daniel.
go ahead.
Yes. Nico?
Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Elena.
Okay. At this stage, we must remember that even if the warehouse senior user is, let's say, a bin manager, okay, the bin can be unlocked only property and control user. Until that moment, the bin is locked. So in case of an urgent issue or something that must be done at that bin, a pick or to that particular bin, the only way to unlock the bin from a warehouse point of view is to cancel completely the inventory record. Okay, so so that's the point. And another issue from for Joy and Gianluca, what we faced during the can be faced during the liquidation, and actually what we faced in Minojust. This was the step. Okay, it was completely missed the last step, because we found several operational done from from a warehouse point of view, telling that the material is missing, but never unlocked from the property control user. So it means that at that stage, items were still into our inventory and stock, even if into blocked bins, but the item will appear. So it's quite important from my point of view, even if monitor constantly also during the liquidation period from New York, this action, this exercise must be done prior to the the liquidation starts, in order that everything is in order into the warehouse and to the inventory, and the liquidation team can perform their action. Because if not, it will be a mess. That's what we faced with Lucia and Gianluca, because the purpose of the liquidation is to start to clear in terms of donation, write-off, and everything else. But if this exercise is not done, is not properly done previously, and for previously I mean 3-4 months before, in order that when the liquidation team arrive on site and they can start their proper action, it could start to be a problem, a real problem, because we face it technically.
Yeah, I see. I totally feel your pain, or definitely, it's for physical verification, for accounting controlling, having all the inventory transactions already, let's say, done before you guys are deployed, just to do, let's say, the delivery business right off and do the disposal of all the items. That will be.
Sorry, Daniel.
That will be the real.
Daniel?
Let's say yes, Brian.
Okay, sorry. I was hearing you very badly. I just wanted to make sure it was the same thing. And yeah, everyone's responding. We had a lot of background noise while you were speaking just now.
What about
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, it's still bad. Every time you speak. If you don't, it's fine.
What about now? Because I already have the cable and
It's breaking up a lot.
really.
Not here as well either.
Okay. Let me just Ali, do you hear me now?
Not, we cannot
No, Daniel.
this.
Okay, let me check whether I changed because I was using my.
Try to, I don't know,
Is it okay?
back or, yeah. Try now.
Hello?
No, it's still bad. See, Elena's is very, very, very clear, but yours is. We can even barely understand what you're saying.
Okay, let me just. Yes. What about now?
A bit better.
A bit better. Okay.
But I do see that warning sign in your navigational bar that says that the connection was bad.
Okay. Still, you see my screen. Sorry for that, guys. But first time it happens this week. Do you see my screen right now?
Now everything's getting better.
Okay.
Your
Thank you,
audio,
guys.
the screen has always been fine. It's mainly the audio.
The audio. What about now? Is it? Can I resume, Brian?
Yeah, much better. You can.
Thank you, Elena. Thanks, Brian. So thank you, Nico, for that. Best case scenario, as we discussed, you have all the physical verification process, content and controlling, and all cleared for you to take action as a liquidator. But reality will tell us that possibly you will have to support accounting and controlling process while you're deployed. Maybe that's why we put it here on the program. But yes, the ideal world will be to have all these things done, and then you guys will take action in the write-off and disposal part and the equipment master record. So then resume. Let's see, within 20 minutes I can finish the whole demo. If not, we will leave it for the second part. But remember that we were recounting the same bin. So we're going to use the same inventory record, the one created initially, and the recount version in this case will be 1. Because obviously you can recount as many times as you want the same bin. Okay, in this case it's the first time that we're going to recount this bin, and then we're going to create the same type of, let me see, for recount document. No, so I'm going to put number 50 over here and going to save it. Okay, basically the type of because I don't want to launch it again and I want to lose time on that. This is the type of document for recount, the same that basically you saw before, right? In this case was a previous inventory number, the 105 that I created yesterday, let's say, but this is a recount of the same bin, and I will have here the same list of material, the serial numbers, and I will basically perform and going through the same process in the recount part. So nothing really difficult, basically to print out again the same recount document. Okay, so then we're going to enter the recount results. So we go through the same T code, LI11N, and hopefully the audio is okay. Okay, so the inventory record here is 106. Recount version, I will have to put 1, which is the version that I created. Okay, so I will have to put the recount version number 1 is today's date. Let's say that instead of myself, in order to, let's say, have more accountability, it's going to be our friend Leandro Taberner doing the recounting, because I did such a bad job that Brian trusts more Leandro, so he's going to take a look at the same bin that I counted just 5 minutes before. Okay, so your name, last name, and then the same thing, you click on enter, and there you put the numbers that Leandro is going to put the numbers that he found now. And instead, let's say, I think the system or the exercise is telling us that in this scenario, I think it's over here. Let's say that during the recount, you finally found the computer. So that's a good news. Okay, so Leandro, much better warehouse user than myself. Okay, and also found 3 more alternators. Okay, so instead of 45, I found 48. Okay, so I will have to reflect the reality in my recount document. So alternators, 48, and my computer will be 1. So I'm not checking here the 0 part. Okay, so hit on enter. So instead of 10%, the difference in terms of alternators is 4%, which corresponds to two less alternators than 50. Okay, so it's okay. I hit on enter. So the computer is there, so the recount document can be saved now. Okay, perfect. So I did the recount, excuse me, Leandro did the recount, and then he clicked on saved, and now, very important, the warehouse senior user can use the following report to review the count differences reported. Okay, so now is the warehouse senior user who's going to take a look with this report, which is LX17, to take a look at these differences in terms of counting. Okay, so now let's say Brian, which is the warehouse senior user, will go to this T code. All right, and this one, which is the same warehouse number and storage type, it's 001, so it's the same building. And the bin, instead of, excuse me, there is the one appearing in your cover page, which is ML50. So it's ML50, that's the bin that that was recounted. Click on execute, and this is what the report tells us. Okay, let's see. So I have here 2 lines. First, related to the alternators. There are 4% less alternators that they should have been there. So the difference is $200. And this is the difference. And here we have information on the fund and the fund center. So you see the impact now, it goes to finance and the budget, right? Because it's going to be $200 less that in terms of inventory. On the contrary, because Leandro found that computer that I didn't find before, then I don't have any difference in terms of value, which is 0%. So this is the report that the warehouse senior user will launch in order to see which are the differences in the different bins. In this case, only for my bin. So after we executed LX17, remember LX17, to see the differences in our bin, then let's see that the property control user, which is this case going to be Elena, she's now going to clear the differences that we in the warehouse found after the counting and controlling process. So the property control user follows the step below to clear differences in the warehouse first, and then in the inventory. So we'll go one step at a time. First, we're going to clear the differences in warehouse. So Elena now will go through the code LI20. So LI20 the same warehouse number. Inventory record will be 106 because in this case, it is really important, as Nico said before, communication is really, really important in order to keep track of what's going on in different bins, because now we're going to clear differences in this particular bin for this inventory record. So in this case, Elena will have to be in close contact with Brian, with the warehouse senior user, to see what's going on and to start clearing the differences in the warehouse. So, but the exercise is telling us, before we clear the difference in the warehouse, let's check the quantities in the bins that have not been updated yet, and that the bin is still blocked because the inventory process is still alive. Okay, so let's go again to LX02 and see whether we see any changes. We'll leave it for the moment, this T code active. Remember that I always have the LX02 open. Last time I opened, I see 50 available stock in terms of alternator on one computer. It was blocked, and this is the inventory record. So I'm going to launch again the same T code with the same data. And you see there is no difference whatsoever yet. Still, available stock is 50 for the alternators, and I have one computer. Okay. Okay, so I checked and nothing's been done. It's okay, no big deal. Okay, why? Because the differences have not been posted yet. So again, property control user, will enter the T code LI20. If I'm not mistaken, is this one? Let me check. So I go LI20. So I'm still here in this transaction. Okay, so I put here my inventory count and I click on enter. And what I'm going to do now, what Elena as a property control user is going to do now, is going to check that yes, still this is a storage bin ML quit 50 with 2 items. First one, after the recounting, we still see 4% of difference, which is 2 alternators less. This is the difference in value that we're going to, let's say, write off from the warehouse, which is $200, and then nothing is going to be impacted in terms of my material, my equipment, which is the laptop, so it's 0%. So before clearing the differences, maybe Elena wants to give a call to Brian to double check that everything, that even another recount is not worth it. So the differences are going to be cleared. So what is going to do is she's going to check that bin, and she's going to click on write off in order to clear the differences. So at this stage, we can check the differences that were clear in the warehouse, and then we're going to go again to LX02. So I checked here, the property control user writes off, and that bin is cleared already. So then let me go back to LX02. We launch again the T code, and you see that now the differences here are reflected. You see these 48 available stock now is changed. Actually, it's 48 instead of 50 now. Okay, and the IA indicator now, it's already, because it's being cleared from the warehouse point of view, there is no X whatsoever. But still, there is an inventory record, and last time that was, let's say, counted and controlled, this bin was today, the 27th of April 2020. Okay, so yes, now from the warehouse point of view, this available stock has been reduced in 2 less items, 2 less alternators. Okay, so we went through LX02. We saw the difference in terms of available stock, and then the property control user, now Elena, is going to clear the differences in inventory, first in warehouse and now in inventory, which is this additional step to update the inventory values with the result of the count. Okay, so first there is an interim, let's say, step, which again with LX02, but instead of storage type 001, what we're going to put here, it's a storage type 999, which is a storage type for the clearing differences, and you'll see how it looks. Okay, so we're going to use the same T code, LX02, but instead of storage type 001, we're going to put 999, and instead of our bin, which was ML50 or ML quit 50, now we're going to put our inventory record number, which it was 106, but with 10 digits. So I'm going to put 7 zeros, 106. So this is basically what I'm going to input in LX02 now. So I go to LX02. Instead of a storage type 101, I'm going to select 999 in order to see the differences. Okay, so let me select that one. And instead of the bin, I'm going to use 7 zeros and then 106, which was the inventory count document that I created, or the warehouse senior user created at the beginning of the exercise. So let me execute. And let's see what we have here. Okay, the first difference is that I only have one material, which is the alternator. And here you see that I have available stock is 2, which basically these are the 2 items that we didn't find. Okay, and this is the report that will tell the property control user which are basically the stock that will have to be cleared from the inventory point of view. Okay, before we cleared from the warehouse, now we're going to clear from the inventory point of view. Okay, so this is done. Okay, so it's cleared that we'll have to write off in the inventory 2 items, 2 alternators. Okay, so now I'm going to let me see, click so LX02. So now for the inventory part, and this is important because this is an important T code, which is set LE_LI21. This is one of the last T codes in order to clear the differences in inventory, to clear these 2 alternators that we didn't find even in the recount process. So let me go back and type that T code. The warehouse number is AF01. Storage type, it's 999 because we're going to clear the differences. And storage bin, it's the inventory count document that we created, which was 106, but it has to be preceded by 7 zeros because it has to be 10 digits. All right. Okay, what else? And we click on execute. Okay, so we execute. And now, basically, this is the last step in order to clear the differences from the inventory point of view. Okay, so it's selected. This is let's say the bin is not 106. Now we are the system points out at the document that it's actually the shell that contains the differences found, which is 2 alternators less, 2 quantity. Okay. And see what else we have to do. We have to go to list, to the navigational menu here, and click on clear online foreground. Clear online foreground. So we go to list, clear online foreground, the property control user. Basically now you see here the message once cleared. So we already cleared the differences from the inventory point of view. We can go again to LX02 with the same storage type, this 999, and see whether we have anything there pending. So let me go back, LX02. Warehouse number F1, storage type 999, because we're going to see whether there is any pending difference. Storage bin 106, which is the document created. There you see list contains no data. So the pending transaction to be cleared, which was these 2 alternators, it's already done. So it's a way for the property control user to double check that everything is on order. And finally, if we want to take a look at or double check the LX02 from the warehouse point of view, LX02, excuse me, slash, and we click our warehouse, storage type 001, storage bin 50, and then let me put the layout that corresponds here. And let's see finally what we have here. Okay, first alternator and the computer, the two materials, two less quantity in terms of spare parts for alternators. That computer is already accounted for. And the inventory record that actually it's, let's say, backing up this information, it's 106 for the recounting document that Leandro created before. And the last time that this storage bin was counted was today, in this case, 27th of April, 2020. So let's say the exercise is finished. So as you can see in the nutshell, and I now go to the cover page. These are basically the T codes that you will have to go through. First, creating the warehouse document. And here I'm overseeing this LX02 and the reports in terms of only transactions to perform this accounting and controlling process. These are the ones, but obviously you have reports that will tell you how things are doing from the warehouse and inventory point of view. It's in the body of the exercise. But first, remember, warehousing user creates the document, prints the document, the user goes through the the accounting and controlling process, enter the results in the system. Someone else is going to do a recount to double check that the information is cleared. And then the property control user will take action. First, clearing the differences in the warehouse with LI20. And secondly, clearing the differences in the inventory with set LA underscore LI21. So this is the end of the exercise. And before I launch again the polling questions, so you guys feel comfortable, hopefully, after this 2-hour session with counting and controlling. Over to you, Brian, Elena.
Daniel, I have a question.
Yes, please.
And sorry if I apologize if I missed some steps or if you already said, but in the case of serialized assets, okay, that there is a shortfall, at what stage the warehouse and property control interact when it comes to identify the shortfalls with the serial numbers or barcode, whatever the case may be?
Okay.
I cannot picture that into the process that you explained so far when it comes to serialized assets. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Gianluca. And you guys can chip in, but I'm going to show to him that basically, in order to, if I understood you well, okay, Gianluca, okay, this is the, let's say, the document that was created in the system for me to do a count or a recount, okay, but just to count. First page, as I said, will give you an overview of what's there. Here I have alternator as a product ID and then a computer. Because the computer is a serialized material, then in the following pages, the system, we have here a possibility of, entry the date when it was counted and some signatures, it's okay. Then the system will tell us, okay, from this particular PID, which is 150005107, which is a computer, in my plant and in this storage location, the system understands that in any bin, there are these displayable, let's say, serialized numbers. From this one, all different, to the next page, all of them. So if I'm, for example, the warehouse user, and I know that I have to find one computer, I will go to the bin, I will check that computer, I will check the serial number of that computer, and I will see, okay, so is this one? Is 101.27.921. So here, I'm going to put a yes. So from let's say the counting perspective, I have pointed out at this particular serial number, okay? And this is the one that I found in the bin, okay? But on the contrary, if I don't have a shortfall, I have, let's say, more computers that I was expecting, and I find, let's say, this one, for example, I will have to put another yes in my, let's say, counting document, okay? And then eventually I will have to see why this piece of equipment with this serial number is in this bin and not in another, okay? So as a reference, the way to identify, if I'm not mistaken with your question, the serial number in the counting and controlling exercise is by, let's say, launching this report, this printing document, this inventory document for counting and controlling, and identify the serial number that for this particular plant and storage location, the system understands that have all these computers. I don't know if I answered your question, Gianluca, but if not, anyone can chip in and complement. Over to you guys.
No, it's clear. Thanks, Daniel.
Okay, thanks, Gianluca. So without further ado, I'm going to, let's see, post in the chat. Let me stop sharing because it's easier. I'm going to put the polling question so we can make sure that we, and if I'm just over 4 minutes on the time, please bear with us. But if we finish this part, then we can resume the afternoon session, and I leave to Brian this, but we can resume the afternoon session. Let's see, fresh for support in this exercise on the rest of the exercises, but we're going to make sure that we share the polling questions again. So I'm going to post it in the chat right now. So if you're so kind, please take a look at the polling questions and see whether you feel now more comfortable with the questions. And if not, then I didn't do my job well. So if you have just the kindness to go through the 6 questions again, that will be great. You can do it now or during lunchtime. So, but then we will review the questions together right after the lunch break. So over to you guys, Elena and Brian. That's all from my part.
There's nothing pending in the chat. We will continue the process of writing of the equipment on Thursday and Friday. Yeah, over to you, Brian.
All right, thanks, Elena. Daniel and everyone else, there was a bit of a discussion in the chat about what the system allows versus what is the proper procedure. Like, for example, does the system allow you to clear differences even if the process of counting and controlling is not complete yet? And as far as I remember from the last time I did the refresher course on this, you can clear differences at any time and go back and forth in the system without actually closing the counting and controlling process per se. But of course, if after the counting and controlling process is done, the clearing is done, and there are still items that are that show, right, as there's a discrepancy, we'd have to have, according to what Nico and Pietro were discussing in the chat, we'd need supporting documentation, right, for the write-off case to take place later on. But in any case, the system does allow you to clear the differences before the process is completely done. And of course, the documentation would only be needed if the value is over the threshold, as we were discussing, and not below. Unless I'm mistaken, that's the only conversation that was taking place while you were finalizing, and then Gianluca's question came afterwards. But if you can take a look at the chat, you see that we were sort of answering each other there. And unless there's anything to add to that, I think that everything was clear.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thanks, Elena, for that. So I don't know, Brian, if it's okay, we'll leave let's say the polling questions to, let's see, be reviewed after we resume from the lunch break. But if it is okay, we can have, let's say, a support for practical exercises, for the training environment, for anything that you may need in the afternoon session. And of course, I think that still the New York session at 4, it's still there on. So instead of having, let's say, another session on counting and controlling. I think that it was good enough for the morning, and then we can just resume for the practical scenarios that you think we can go again, or we can support in any of the exercises from last week as well. So for me, it's all. Thank you, guys. And I will share the evaluation of this session right now as well in the chat. Over to you, Brian.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Yes, please take your time to answer the evaluation of the morning session, and join us during the afternoon session. Bring your exercises, the ones you're performing and have been practicing throughout the weekend, so we can provide support. We can maybe see how we can do it. If it's one by one in group, we'll see if the ones that are pending are more related to day 2, day 3, and so on. But let's use the afternoon session to go through the exercises and see what issues you're facing. All right, so Daniel just posted in the chat now the evaluation survey, so please answer that one. And if nothing else, we'll see you guys in the afternoon.
Okay. Have a good lunch. Thanks.